Welcome to Monday Markers with Charlie. This is our program for October the 26th, 2020. For this past month, I've been dealing with markers that deal with the history of indigenous peoples in our region. We'll go back to doing labor history markers in the month of December. This is brought by the Battle of Homestead Foundation, sponsors this. And today I'll be talking about George Washington and Guyasota, the great Seneca war chief. There is a great and a very powerful statue of George Washington and the great Seneca warrior Guyasota by sculptor Jim West. That was dedicated in 2006 with the inspiration and work of our friend Lynn Squilla on Duquesne Heights overlooking the city of Pittsburgh. It commemorates a meeting that was held on the banks of the Ohio in 1770. It's both important and unique because it displays two historical antagonists, and they are portrayed as equal and literally on the level. In this age when historic monuments are being taken down, this pair of great warrior and antagonists and people with a very different view of our regional history demonstrates how contested events and historic struggles can be equitably portrayed. Guyasota and Queen Aliquippa, who we talked about earlier, are the two best known and remembered indigenous leaders in our area during the period of the European invasion of Western Pennsylvania. They represented two opposing sides of the native relationship to the competing French and English invaders. Not that they were at all antagonists between them, but they had different roles to play. They also had very different attitudes toward the Virginia and Pennsylvania Americans, who also competed for power and position at the forks of the Ohio. Aliquippa represented Seneca power as a deeply respected clan mother in a society where women had great respect and power. She and many native peoples, including Guyasota, held great respect for William Penn, who they called Onas, because the word in Delaware that had meant quill or pen, and that was the name then that was adopted by native peoples toward William Penn and his immediate successors in particular, and the Quakers in general. In fact, William Penn, before he came to America, had written the Delawares a letter, and he declared his intent at that time to bring fairness and peace in all his dealings with the native peoples. And while he was granted personal proprietorship of Pennsylvania by the King of England, he insisted on paying for all land that was obtained from the Delaware native peoples. And he recognized native peoples' legal rights, and he did not seek to convert them to Quakerism. He respected very much their culture and religious beliefs. He particularly admired their generosity. He said, "In liberality they excel. Nothing is too good for their friend. Give them a fine gun, a coat, or another thing, and it may pass through 20 hands before it sticks. Wealth circulates like the blood. All parts partake." In many senses, he thought the Delaware Indian were more Christian than most Christians. The warrior Guyasota, on the other hand, who was very well known in our area for accompanying the young George Washington on his first trip to our region in 1753. He's commemorated by another statue in Sharpsburg where he had land. And he came here, he accompanied Washington on his mission to the northern reaches of the Allegheny River and French Creek to warn the French, who were building a series of forts from Lake Erie to the Allegheny, Ohio watershed, that they were encroaching on English claimed land, which had been claimed because England had a treaty and claimed protectorship or overlordship over the Iroquois. Guyasota was a spokesperson for indigenous peoples at major councils and conferences several times with his friend Simon Girty, who was the translator. And while he was probably not at the Battle of the Monongahela at that point, still being at least nominally on the side of the British, he led the attack on Major James Grant in 1758, siding by then, like Girty, openly and forcefully with the French. He was an important leader of the great 1763 uprising after the defeat of the French in Quebec, that the British called the Conspiracy of Pontiac, but many others call the Pontiac-Guyasota War. In 1768, he was the chief spokesperson at the Fort Pitt Council, protesting white settlers who were moving in and occupying land on the Monongahela and Youghiogheny without paying any compensation to native peoples. George Washington first gained fame, of course, precipitating a global conflict between France and England in 1754 at an ambush at Jumonville Glen and a battle at Fort Necessity. He was a surveyor, a young surveyor, becoming a wealthy landowner and slaveholder by marriage. He was also a very ambitious land speculator. Though no record of the meeting portrayed by Jim West exists, when the future president met in 1770 with Guyasota on the banks of the Ohio, Washington was there looking to claim, as a veteran of the French and Indian War, 20,000 acres of choice bottomland along the Ohio. And he also, more secretively behind the scenes, was a part of a Virginia company that envisioned a more or less feudal proprietorship proprietary grant from the English monarch on both sides of the Ohio River, which of course was against British treaty obligations. But Washington's worst act against native peoples was the three-pronged attack on the Iroquois Nation in 1779, who the Iroquois, particularly under pressure from the Mohawk, who were very loyal to England. The Seneca were always much more divided between French and British sympathies. Washington gave a notorious order to General Sullivan, which stated, quote, "Your immediate objects are the total destruction and devastation of their settlements and the capture of as many prisoners of every age and sex as possible." 20 towns were burnt to the ground. Cornfields that produced over 1 million bushels of corn were destroyed, orchards torched, and gardens ravaged. Starvation and sicknesses followed in the wake of this devastation. It's estimated that Iroquois population in the United States fell from 10,000 before the Revolution to 4,000 afterward. Its formidable organization and military abilities broken. In revenge for such devastation to his people, Guyasota launched an attack on Hannistown, the last major Native American attack in Pennsylvania, the county seat of Westmoreland. After that burning of Hannistown, it was, of course, getting quite old. He was broken, often drunk. He lived for a time on land that he owned just upstream from Gertie's Run on the Allegheny near Sharpsburg. Like many natives, he remembered William Penn, his goodness, and his vision for a peaceful and just Pennsylvania. Guyasota, once known as the Hunter, he wrote a letter to Philadelphia to his beloved brother Onis. Of course, Penn was long gone, but his descendants, his government, asking for help. When I was young and strong, our country was full of game which the good Spirit sent for us to live upon. The lands that belonged to us extended far beyond where we hunted. Hunting was then not tiresome. It was a diversion. It was pleasure. When your fathers asked land from my nation, we gave it to them. Guyasota has always been a friend to Onis and his children of Pennsylvania. He is very old, and he wonders at his own shadow. It has become so little. He has no children to take care of him, and the game is driven away by the white people. Guyasota died around the time that George Washington delivered his farewell address. His grave was not marked.